All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. We're really excited to talk about how to hire a VA that'll save you hundreds of hours a year, and I might argue thousands of hours. My name is Dan Fleischer, co-founder of HireBus here, and I'm here with Brandon Lazar, who is the founder of Ninja VA. So we can tell you how he finds incredible VAs and delivers them to hundreds of home service businesses every month around the country.
Awesome. Great to be here, Dan. Thanks for having me.
So Brandon and I were talking, I don't know, it was like a month ago or so. We were just talking and I was like, we should just put our heads together because obviously you're doing a lot of hiring. We support people in hiring. And then we were like, let's record this and share kind of our three key points of how we bring such good talent. And you obviously know the VA space super well. So I'd love for you just to talk about your three main teaching points, and I'll layer on what we see in the industry, obviously with VAs, but other roles in home service businesses. So we can help everyone here learn the tricks of the trade and how they can bring really talented VAs into their business to save them hundreds, probably thousands of hours each year.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. So first off, just to start off, my name is Brandon Lazar. I'm a Conquer coach, and I'm actually a 15-year veteran of the home services and the trades industry. In March of this past year, I actually sold my business. So super excited to be on this next path, which is building out Ninja VA and a performance pay bonus system called Bonus Up. So it's a pleasure to be here, to say the least. And yeah, to your point, I feel like there's just such a great overlap with our two products. Virtual assistants are kind of like, in my opinion, they're like a secret weapon in 2023, especially with, costs rising, inclusive of our labor. Work ethic is not that great sometimes and not that strong, not like what it used to be. Where virtual assistants done right can be an awesome answer. And I think applying your product in that environment is just the best of both worlds.
So true. And I think like as tools become more digital, as we all become more digitally savvy and our customers become more digitally savvy, we've just seen the value of hiring VAs on your team, both for your own business and for the VAs, and the efficiency and your ability to be mobile skyrocket. Obviously, Brandon, you and I met when in Conquer, but it's just become almost table stakes to have strong VAs in your team at this point. So we want to make sure that everyone has the tools and the know-how to bring really good talent onto their team. So we talked about, when we were planning for this, we talked about the three key points. Hit us with what the first most important thing is as you're thinking about how do you bring good VAs for you into your business and then into people's teams.
Yeah, definitely. So first off, I think what you're going to notice is like there's a lot of similarity when it comes to hiring a VA versus what you might be a little bit more fluent with in terms of like hiring a technician, right? I always say at the end of the day, when we're talking about VAs, the blood is still red. We're still dealing with humans. And I think sometimes, as business owners, we almost get kind of scared away from that inevitable fact. But the reality is we're still humans dealing with humans, right? At the end of the day, we just have to recognize that. And I think it should really start as early as when we create the job ad in order to create something that works good for them, something that's appetizing, that's something that lures them to your opportunity versus maybe the other ones that they might have, right?
It's so important. Like, and I think this goes from hiring, interviewing, onboarding, training, engaging, but everyone pretty much wants the same thing, which is like stability, consistency, and challenge, feeling rewarded. And so that's extra true with VAs, and the fact that that's like the foundation of how you all hire is so important. So what are some of these job ads? Like, what do you include in your job ads to differentiate yourself when you're recruiting and hiring a VA?
Yeah. So I like to start out with just realizing where we are in the marketplace, right? We're not Dell, we're not Amazon, we're not Coca-Cola, right? We're probably a small home service business or a small trades business, right? So if those are the cards that we're dealt, then let's play the hand, right? So I think there's an opportunity there to be a little bit unique and maybe even a little bit quirky at times. And you can ultimately get away with things that maybe one of those large companies can't do, right? At the end of the day, though, we're competing with them to get that perfect, awesome, rock star caliber candidate onto our team. So I think start with that, make it about them, and really almost start with a bullet point list, what's in it for them? Why should they care about our opportunity versus the other ones?
That the make it about them and the bullet point list is incredible. We've actually run, we do like a ton of job postings for people. We run hiring funnels for folks. And so
Cool.
we've just tested a ton of job ads and a ton of formats. And we found a one sentence start and then who you are in a bulleted list outperforms on Indeed by like 78% on average as of right now. And so keeping it simple, keeping it about them, keeping it punchy, not having a whole paragraph about your company to start, no one cares about that. They want to know if they're the right fit for you. So we have a lot of alignment, a lot of data that backs that up, Brandon. Exactly what you said.
Yeah, and again, it's so similar to how we adjusted my home service business's ads when it came to employment, right? We made it all about the technician or the prospective technician at that point. And I think realizing the ultimate reality that like half of HR or hiring people is about selling them on the position, right? It's not just about, them applying to us like it used to be. And, you must be clean, drug-free. These are the hours of work. This is the expectation of the role. Like that stuff that's old. That's behind us now, right? So realizing that, yeah, 50% of this equation is actually selling, even though it is still considered like human resources type stuff.
100%. I love that mindset shift. And it doesn't mean you can't still qualify. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but like early on, top of funnel, you want as many people going in as possible. And so market, sell, sell, sell. One thing that you brought up, Brandon, earlier was look at the other postings. I love that. Like go test out what the competition looks like. So what have you noticed when looking at other job postings and how do you differentiate from them? I know you talked about the make it about them, but is there anything specific that you've seen that really dials in your job ads?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, like having a really good indication as to who we're looking for, or almost like what that avatar is, just goes so far, right? Because if we can almost like visualize that person, what they look like, what they feel like, how they talk, how intelligent they are, how organized they are, I think it's so much easier to like cater the job ad to that prospective person, right? So I think that's always like a really good place to start. And honestly, I like the concept that it's 50% about selling, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also like the comparison here that like when we have our sales funnel, when we're getting quote requests and, we're going out in the field and we're submitting bids and estimates, a lot of those approaches or the best practices that we employ out in the field to sell our work is actually 100% applicable and true in a HR hiring environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So same way you wouldn't let a quote request sit in your inbox for 3 days. Well, same holds true when you have somebody applying to join your team, be it a VA or a technician, right? That's like the speed to lead is still very much a real thing, right? And there's a lot of different examples of how similar both those funnels are.
Yeah, they're the same thing. Like I think as soon as I started to realize that it's the same thing, it made a ton of sense. Like big top of funnel, qualify as much as you can before you spend any time, before you roll a truck to go give an estimate. Make sure they're actually a prospective buyer. All of those prospects all of those processes for sales in our businesses apply here for hiring. This is awesome. I love the like alignment and philosophy that we have here, especially around Attract. Talk to me a little bit about how you qualify, because I know that you bring in tons of candidates in top of funnel, but you also don't have unlimited time. You need to use your time wisely while you're vetting and screening them. So what do you do to qualify these candidates once you've created really strong job ads?
Yeah. So exactly to your point, right? Like time is scarce. I'm sure everyone can agree here that there's probably way too many things to do and way too few hours, right? If they could invent that eighth day, it would be just an amazing thing for us, right? But yeah, you're ultimately totally correct, right? We need to create a way of starting at the top of the funnel to bring the candidate pool down. Now, I think it's worth noting that at any point we can remove a candidate from that funnel, or they can kind of self-select themselves and say, you know what, not so interested, or this is just the person I am, and I just don't follow through with the next ask. And I'm almost going to self-select myself out of that funnel, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like the tangible, tactical things that you can have in a funnel, I think it can vary, right? You can have some things that are automated, some things that are like small little details that you're hoping they're going to grab onto. It could even be so much as like, asking the candidate to do something that kind of loosely aligns with what the ultimate expectations of the role are going to be, right? Ultimately, though, we're trying to go from, in our case, usually for a single VA placement through Ninja VA, we have at least 200 applicants at the top of the funnel, and we have to bring them down through the process of a number of filters to that one candidate that will ultimately place with a trades or a home service business.
Yeah. It's interesting. We haven't talked about this, but that 200 to 1 number is what we see working really well at HireBus too. And I think that shocks a lot of people. I think a lot of people, when they first hear that, it shocks them, and it shocked me at first. But if you're going to get a really good person, you need to make sure you're building up that funnel and you have a good pool. I think, and we've all fallen trap into this, where if hiring is a task, it gets easy just to be like, oh, I had like 10 or 15 good people, and 3 of them, sounded pretty good, and I can just bring one on. I got to fill a spot quickly. The pain of that will be felt for a long time. Like, focusing on building out that top of funnel of 200 people ish, and then qualifying it down from there is what it takes. And so I don't know, Brandon, it's interesting. We got to do a study on like what it is about that number, because that keeps popping up in the done for you funnels that we build for people as well, that 200 to 1 ratio.
Yeah. And yeah, it's tough. Like, that's the world we live in. And I think it's consistent with technicians. If you use in-person admin people, or in my world with the virtual assistants, that 200 to 1 is kind of like the legwork you have to put in order to be like, relatively confident that you've got the best candidate possible. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the same as like some of, the people I've worked with, in terms of our marketing efforts. Sometimes they're shocked at how many lawn signs you have to put out to get like even just a fair gauge, right? Or how many flyers, right? Like, we're talking thousands of flyers to get one response. And this is the same idea, right?
But the beauty is, once you know the math of it, once you know the funnel math, you're like, oh, okay, well, if I build a funnel and then I can have all of these 200 applicants, that costs me, I don't know, maybe $200 on Indeed if you have good job ads. And then obviously the time of messaging them, time of interviewing, but all of a sudden you realize, like, in terms of expense, it can be pretty reasonable, especially if you use good systems and processes, especially if you use, and it gets even better, obviously, if you use like, professional services like Ninja VA that do this for you. But you realize it's a formula, just like marketing. And once you know the numbers, it's a little less stressful and a little easier to swallow, so to speak.
Yeah. I think it's also really important that entrepreneurs focus on, yes, their time and their energy and the effort, but also like, does the task bring you energy, or does it take, right? Because like, I think, yeah, it's obvious. We know we get 8-10 hours in the day, right? But like, the psyche and the speed of the leader being the speed of the pack is just so crucial, right? So yeah, if you have the time, that's one part, but to me, that's not the full equation, right? Yeah. If you pop in, these initial applicants to something like HireBus, it's going to do a lot of this legwork to potentially, guard your energy that you can repurpose and devote to something that's more important and that will actually move the business needle in a big way.
Yeah, that's so powerful and so important. Well, I think that's a pretty good segue to talk about, how do you at Ninja VA qualify your candidates? Like, what are you using to qualify them in a way that's efficient with your time?
Yeah, so we just starting recently here, we're actually using HireBus, which is super cool, because I think a lot of people, when they think about HireBus, it's a great breakthrough product, but they've kind of been maybe a little bit reductive in terms of where it can be applied to, right? And again, my saying, the blood is red when it comes to virtual assistants, we're dealing with humans. So of course, something like HireBus is applicable there. So that is one of the assessments we're putting our VA candidates through at Ninja VA, which is super cool. We also have another of other assessments, right? And again, I think this goes back to us clearly defining what is that role and what does that avatar ultimately look like in the end, right? So inside of our system, ability to speak and write English with little to no accent is like our first and foremost. That, in my opinion, all VAs that we place should be able to be customer facing, meaning like inbound and outbound calls, emails, etc. Right? And if you're settling for a VA that can't do those things in a home service business or a trades business, like you're kind of missing out in terms of what they could have brought to the table, right? So first and foremost, ability to speak and write in English. Then there's a bunch of assessments we put them through. So English ability, written and oral, communication, attention to detail, the DISC assessment, the HireBus assessment, and then it comes down to just like a straight up initial interview.
Mhm.
That's what we release to one of our any of our clients in terms of, you know, giving them a little bit of a tool where they can gauge on first glance whether or not they feel like it would be a good fit.
And for you, before you get to that initial interview, how much of this is automated for you? Like all these assessments, the language test, et cetera, how much of that are you all doing by hand? I know it's a lot of work that you put in but that's how you get such good folks. Talk to us a little bit about like, how do you do all of that?
Yeah. And I'd love to say, like, in a world of chat GPT and AI, that it's like, oh, we just click a button and they magically appear, right? Unfortunately, we're not there. And I don't think we're going to be there for some time, right? And I think a lot of this, I was actually going over this with our lead recruiter today. A lot of this, we might have systems and process in place, but a lot of this just comes down to like the gut judgment of another human, right? So unfortunately, that, you know, you have a process at play, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be less work, right? In our opinion, though, it's all worth it once we land at that one final candidate at the end of it all, right? Because they are like, same way in your home service business, the best way to market your service or your offering is by doing really great work and leaving that behind. Same holds true with our VAs, right? Nobody's going to refer us out if, you know, we're providing kind of a patchy caliber when it comes to our placements.
Yep. That's so powerful. It's so important. It's so interesting because I love what you said earlier about you not only have to like focus on your time, but you have to focus on what it has to do that give you energy. What
Yes.
gives you energy. And
Yeah.
I think that's so important because that just creates momentum for us as entrepreneurs. And all of these items are pretty logical. Like we're all good. We all know how to do marketing and sales. And that's what this is. But if this doesn't give energy, it can be really draining. And so I think it's really powerful that what you've created, because not only does it save a lot of time for folks, but it also creates energy for them so they can get really good team members, get to really good results, and save time finding those people, and on the tail end with how efficient their teams become with a VA. So I just want to reiterate that because that one hit me hard. That's really good, Brandon.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the early days, we're maybe a little bit overzealous and we're like, oh, I could do that. And I could do my own uniforms and like, oh, I'll go fill up all the work vehicles by myself on my Saturday. Right. But it's like that gets old pretty quick, and quality of life does matter. So yeah, stuff like this, there's no doubt that you could probably figure this out on your own, and many do, right? We do it easier, and this is our sole focus. So, you know, there's a little bit of a comparison to be made there.
Yeah, 100%. Well, what's the final step? We talked about attract, we talked about qualify, and now you all do a fair bit of work selecting folks. So we'd love to hear like, what do you do for your interview process? And how do you select VAs that you know will be successful in the variety of businesses that you all serve?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a little bit multifaceted, right? So yes, we have this top of funnel. We're filtering them down with assessments, with, you know, little asks, maybe little, you know, little asks in terms of like little assignments to be done that maybe align with the job role. Initial interviews is a big one, but then ultimately speaking, you know, we have to make that judgment call with the client, of course, right? So we hop on for a 3-person group interview. And ultimately, at that place, you know, the client kind of comes in and they're essentially like, the metaphor is they're the surgeon, right? Everything's been cleaned for them. They come in and like everything's prepped, and they get to sit down for a 30-minute interview with 1 or 2 or 3 VAs lined up. And at that point, you know, they can just conduct an interview. And if conducting admin interviews is not something you have a lot of experience with, especially with respect to virtual assistant interviews, you know, we're there to help and assist, or even full on conduct it for you if you like. But at that point, that's kind of like everything coming together. we're looking at their assessment results to gauge their caliber. We're looking at, their energy, their ability to speak English, and even down to like something like, I use the term like latency, like sometimes, call it like it is. If you're speaking to someone in a foreign language, there can just be that little bit of gap, right? And I can only imagine how I sound when I go to France, right? So, I'm certainly human as well. But, at that point, we're going to just gauge all those different factors, and we can go into it knowing with a high level of confidence at that point that we've kind of left no stone unturned, right?
That's such a strong process, and it's great that you share all the information, tee up the folks for interviews. We found, obviously we support with a ton of roles, but we found going into these interviews with all of the core application, the HireBus, the resume, all of those items teed up, and making it so the business owner, all they do is just get really good candidates scheduled on their calendar, and they have all that information at their fingertips. All of a sudden, to your point earlier about giving energy, it's like we let the business owner do the part that's important, the interview and the ultimate assessment with the information that matters. And so we found that part. And I know some folks don't necessarily like want to hold the interviews themselves or just want to select, but we found that piece of saying like, no, it's important that you get to know these people, that you have them learn who you are, so that, because they're going to be joining your team, like they're going to be a big part of your team, and that relationship's really important. And so the fact that you kind of like tee up the business owners to interview their new team member is really strong, and I think a really good step in your process.
Yeah. And then I think just giving them that chance to like reflect and like, those intangibles, I feel like in HR are just as important as the actual answers that were given, right? So like, what was the energy of that person? Or like, do I feel like they'd be a good culture fit? All those things I feel like are what you ultimately as the client need to make the decision based on, right?
100%. 100%. Well, I mean, I think it'd be kind of interesting I know you share that you have a spotlight that you share with your clients. That might be useful for folks to see, just to see all the different data points that you collect. And, as they're thinking about their interview process to potentially hire a VA, maybe they can say, maybe that's something I should collect. Or they could say, hey, let's work together so that I can get this teed up for me. But do you mind sharing the spotlight? I thought that was really interesting when you showed it to me the other day.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that here. Okay, so when you log into your Ninja VA account, this is what you'll see. So you'll see if your VA is on, and if they are on, you can actually see live screen grabs of what they're working on, what they're focused on, what websites they're in, etc., which is a really cool management tool. When it comes to the candidate side of things, these are the candidates that will be placed in your account, okay? And as you can see, we see a little bit of readout in terms of what they cost, what their overall assessment results were in terms of their score. But then beyond that, you can actually click into this and you'll see that initial interview that has already been pre-recorded and pre-conducted for you. And again, at this step, you can analyze their energy, their ability to speak and verbalize. If accent is a concern for you, this is kind of that step where you get to assess it. And then down here is what we call the spotlight. So this is the result of all the assessments that they went through throughout our hiring funnel that, again, we've conducted as part of our service. What you'll see here is this is the HireBus assessment, which is super cool, right? So I think it's important to always get a number of different data points, but I think HireBus is just such a reliable one. And again, I don't think a lot of people think about applying it into the world of VAs.
That's awesome. That's so cool to get all this detail and like talk about a really useful resume. It's not self-reported. It's all objective. You get the video, you get the assessments, you get the real things you're considering, the cost, the work hours, all of those things. That's so valuable. Very cool. I love this.
And the cool thing here is you can easily compare apples to apples to apples, right? Whereas if somebody just submits a generic resume in terms of how they thought they would structure it, and then somebody else does it, and then somebody else doesn't even submit a resume, like it's really hard to compare those things. and the things that they're mentioning might actually not be what's really reliable or even relevant, right? Where this is like to the point.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so powerful. And I don't know, I've lived in a world where I didn't think these assessments and these pre-screening tools were important. I was just like, oh, when I hire people, just give me 30 minutes in the room with them. I'll figure it out. And what I figured out is I'm not very good at that. And so it's been really eye-opening over the last, decade or so to start building systems and not leaving hiring up to gut or chance, like exactly what you just saw and exactly what we've done with HireBus. And so I know a lot of we want to share this content mostly to our customers, but for folks that don't use HireBus or don't use Ninja VA, we also want to share some benefits for listening and being a part of this. Number one, for HireBus, we'll give you a free assessment, and we'll also give you what we call like a free strategy session where we'll go over the results with you. So I'll show you all like super fast what that is. Our assessment is it's one question. It's been taken millions of times. It's been developed over 25 years by clinical psychologists. And the power of it, it's one question and it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to complete. How I act most of the time, you select these, and when you finish, you get results and you get that right seat score that we talked about earlier. That's so important. So I'd love for you to take the HireBus assessment yourself, see it in action, and we can go over the results with you, and you see, hey, is this valid? Is this data useful? Well, maybe I should have all my team take it. Maybe I should have my candidates take it. There'll be a link down there, but it'll be hirebus.com/free, so you can get your free assessment. And Brandon, I think you were also going to give folks something that helps in the hiring process that you all do at Ninja VA.
Yeah, definitely. So I think if I were to summarize the people that come to us as clients, they love the concept of a VA jumping on board, working and being super disciplined, detail oriented, and, just a real rock star when it comes to the admin side at less than half the cost of an in-person admin person. But they're just overwhelmed. Like, they love the benefits, not really sure how to get themselves or their business prepared for someone like that jumping on board, right? So that's always a component. The second one is, what can a VA actually do in a home service business or a trade business, right? And we've decided to really niche down, and that's the only industries that we service at Ninja VA is home services and the trades, right? So nice. We know a lot about what a VA can do from self-experience, as well as helping other people to implement it, right? So I do have a link here to an ultimate job description guide specifically for virtual assistants joining up in a trades business or a home service business. And nice. To get that free guide, you just go to ninjava.com/job.
And we'll put it somewhere, it's going to be somewhere. We'll link it.
Up, down, sideways.
Yeah, it'll be in the video.
Yes.
Brandon, this is awesome. Thanks for sharing some of your learnings and your expertise. Obviously, you've built an incredible business. Now you've built home service business. Now you've built multiple incredible software businesses that help home service business. So it's awesome just to, mind share with you and talk about what we're passionate about, bringing great people into great companies so they can be even better. So appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.